Welcome to the second part of Monday Hurling. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Michael Verney with me as always. We're here brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get these jerseys, this sweet Wexford one, that sweet Cork one, you won't be seeing either of them in the Hurling Championship again this year, so we said we'd give them a final outing. Go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame. Sensational.
Hey, you were happy enough to get that one in about Cork. You were happy enough to get anything in about Cork not being in the Championship.
Purely coincidental. I know, like, two great wins for Tipperary to come through. A bit of a test of character, I would say, against the Rebels. 218 to 117, and Clare. Arguably performance of the weekend. I mean, Kilkenny might have something to say about that, and we talked about it in the other part of the hurling show. This is qualifiers only, so keep an eye out for the other one, part one, which is about the two provincial finals. But Clare, what a performance. 121 win, or to 17-point win over Wexford. They were really good. But Davy Fitz afterwards, he was asked about coming back for a fifth season, and he said he was left in no doubt in the dressing room. They made it clear what they think. Does Davy Fitz deserve a fifth season?
I tell you, it's an awkward one in a sense, because if you look at the trajectory of his 4 years with Wexford, you're looking at 17, massive progress initially, a big league run, league semi-final, beating Kilkenny, getting to a Leinster final. Then you're looking at 18, totally tailed away, limped out of the Championship. Then you're looking at 19, Leinster champions, beating a pint by Tipperary in the All-Ireland semi-final. And then you're looking at 2020, a disaster of a season with basically two no-shows in two big Championship games. Does he deserve a fifth season? Based on the good things that he has done in Wexford, I would say yes. And you're looking at, he's got them really competitive, got Leinster title out of him, which, few would have predicted. I remember looking back on that Dublin-Wexford game and that wet evening in Croke Park in 2016, and you're thinking 3 years later, could Wexford be Leinster champions? Very unlikely. So to me, he does deserve a fifth season. It's just his contract is that he's for another 2 years. Like when he was signed on for 2020, it was signed on for 2021 as well. It's just that they're coming into 2021 in a really awkward spot after a really bad season, and you're wondering, with the changes that you'd imagine he's going to make, is there enough time for those changes to be bed in one season? I'm not so sure, but the way 2020 blends into 2021 with the time of the year the championship finishes, I'd be surprised if he's not back there.
I think it'd be crazy to get rid of him at this stage, but you do have to ask what happened this year and how much of it falls on him. And coming out after the game against Galway, when you've been beaten by 13 points comprehensively enough, and saying that the players put up the white flag, and essentially that the players quit in the game, whether that was before the game, during the game, after the game, but essentially that this group, who had come in as Leinster champions from the year before, just quit. And to go from a team that was close to winning an All-Ireland semi-final and getting into a final a year ago, to have no real changes. It's the same management team, it's pretty much the same players. We saw the county championship happen, Shell Maliers won. Maybe, some people would say, where's the likes of Ross Banville or some of the other players that were in that grouping? But to go all the way from that to the performances they showed, where does the blame lie? I mean, obviously the manager, at the end of the day, he's going to get all the kudos, so he's to get all the credit, or he's going to get all the credit, so he's obviously going to have to take a fair share of the criticism as well. It was a high-risk strategy saying that the players put up the white flag, because obviously, he's going to feel that he's prepared as good as ever, so it really does put the pressure on them. And if they don't respond, then that kind of, you do something like that in a Hail Mary situation, and it really is putting the spotlight on the players. And if they don't respond, then you ask, well, do I hold the same do I hold the dressing room the way I did before? Because now I'm after calling everybody out and they haven't responded. So this is the risk. I think he should get a fifth season, because he's brought them too far. And to be honest, I think sometimes it's overlooked how far Liam Dunn brought them. Because I remember talking to Owen Quigley, who obviously scored one of the greatest points of all time in Croke Park back in 2005, that one where he doubled on it from midfield. And he was talking about how, this was about 5 years ago, I interviewed him, how that even the body shapes, how their body fat percentage of every player used to be through the roof. And Liam Dunn came in and that was brought down an awful lot. And, they had a couple of big performances. Obviously got a couple of heavy beatings as well in the last season or so, particularly that game against Kilkenny and also Limerick, where they lost both by 24 points. But he brought it on a nice bit, and Davy Fitz obviously took it on several levels more, winning against Kilkenny in Nolan Park, beating them then in the next year in the Leinster Championship, and obviously lifting the Leinster title. So they've come a massive way. But it was just high stakes stuff to go pointing the finger at the players and saying you gave up. Because it really does question everything that you're doing then at that point. So yeah, he gets it. But to turn it around in the space of a few weeks, you know, previously, if you kind of end the season, you've got 4 or 5 months before you have to start building up again. But now it's very quickly for all of that to settle and get going again. So I don't know, like whether it works out is another thing, but I think he definitely deserves that 5th season.
No, I go along with that too. I'm surprised, you know, a lot of Wexford people would be saying, you know, that he needs to go maybe or need to change, whatever. I think you need to be kind of careful what you wish for as well. Like, unless the replacement is going to be really high caliber, I definitely wouldn't be replacing him unless he feels he's, as you say, that he's maybe lost the dressing room or something like that. I wouldn't be replacing him. But looking at them, like, I don't know. It's just what they're doing is a bit over the top. It's totally OTT. They're just too much passing. Like, there's a lot of the time it's passing for the sake of passing. Why do you pass the ball? You pass the ball to give the ball to someone in a better position. It almost looks like at times. Dermot O'Keefe was a classic example. He looked like a lad that was just, I don't know, would you say crippled with fear, but almost that he was going to do the wrong thing or not do the systematical thing, what they were supposed to do. And there was loads of lads like that. I actually thought in the first 10 or 15 minutes, I actually thought they played well. And the way they were playing was fine against the breeze. Now, they missed a couple of chances and should have been in a better position at half time. But it just went too far. They needed to be far more direct. With that breeze, they could have scored a lot from out the pitch. They could have, you know, put McDonald in the edge of the square and tried to feed him in with ball. It was just all very panicked then as well. Once we got to the 58th minute or that, like, I was listening to Micheál Donoghue and Darren Maloney on commentary, and literally, like, they were calling the game as being over at 55 minutes. And it was over. It never really felt like Wexford were going to make a big run back at it. I suppose there's so many of their big players just not in form this year as well, and Lee Chin not starting as well. Massive, but they have a lot of guys like Rory O'Connor never really raised the gallop and was probably a lucky boy to stay on the field. Dermot O'Keefe never got back up to anything like the levels of last year, and that was, you know, that was a knock-on effect all over the field. Guys just didn't get up to anything like the levels of previous years.
Yeah, and there is that thing of managing the situation and managing the fact that you're up against a horrible wind. That's unfortunate that if you're playing with that in the first half, you can probably build up a big lead. You should. And if you do, then you can sort of do a rear guard action and play maybe, you know, on the break in the second half. And that's something that Tipperary actually didn't do well in the first half, you know, knocking over the scores with the wind. We'll come to that. But Wexford, they had 3 points scored at half time from 11 attempts. And I'll contrast that with how Cork managed their first half. From 8 attempts, they had scored 1-4. So they made the most of it. And you would kind of feel that if you can be fairly close by half time, you've got that chance to kick on in the second half. Be patient and the points scoring
Hang in there, yeah.
But whereas if you look at Wexford, they had 11 chances and scored just 3. Like, that's 27% return. That's not going to be good enough. And as that half wore on, like, it was 4 points to 3. 4 points to 3 after 17 minutes. But by the half time, it was 13 points. You know, sorry, it was 5 points to 3 after 20. And then at half time, it was 13 points to 3. And they weren't able to work the ball upfield. They kept getting turned over. They kept falling into the traps that were being set by Clare. And I know Lee Chin was out, and when he came on, you saw him catching a couple of balls and being dangerous. But you shouldn't be able to take one player out of a team and things fall apart. But we saw this earlier in the league as well. Wexford lost 18 points to 15 against Clare earlier in the year, and they weren't able to deal with the league, or with the wind. It's all about being able to manage a situation. And in the provincial final review show that we did today, we talked about Galway and Joe Canning going for a goal when they were a point ahead from a free early on in the second half, and was knocking the ball over the bar. Was that the better percentage call? I just look at some of the attempts that Wexford had, and just like shots dropping short, frees going wide. Like Lee Chin wasn't on the field to take the frees, and then remember this a couple of seasons ago. There was like 6 or 7 people took frees for Wexford over the course of a season at one point, and Lee Chin was one of the lads at the time. He wasn't as secure on them as he was last season. He must have put in a huge amount of work, and he became the safety blanket for the frees. But then in the first half, Paddy Foley knocking them wide from distance. And I'm not saying they're easy ones, they're obviously hard. Paul Morris went on them. And yeah, just in so many ways, that let them down again. And I just wonder, when things got tough, is white flag ringing in your ear? You know, that kind of stuff that you like everyone outside is questioning, but even your own manager is questioning, and then do the players looking around at each other, feeling there's a share of blame to go around and saying it's not me, and you know people just didn't step up.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think Clare definitely helped with the whole thing. Like people can say what they like, but Conor Cleary was at it before the ball was thrown in, and to be honest with you, I love that. Are you just gonna allow like a team to come in? Wexford are expected to bounce back. He kind of got in a couple of lads' faces straight away, and I saw a couple of people criticise him on Twitter. Like, at the end of the day, lads, this is a man's game. You get stuck in within the rules of the game. He's not doing anything that's illegal or anything like that. And they really went at Wexford. They forced them on the back foot. They forced them to ask questions of themselves and maybe doubt even their own self-belief. And that definitely fed into it as well. And when you have someone like Kelly at the far end doing these amazing things as well, it puts further doubt into the Wexford heads, and they just weren't able to react to it or whatever. And maybe that's ringing in their ears, maybe like, oh, are we raising the white flag again? And then all of a sudden you're kind of crippled with fear and you're not sure what you're doing and you're trying too hard and it feels like you're playing in a straitjacket almost. And I think it all kind of fed in to another no-show really, and a disastrous 2020. And like they basically Galway wiped the floor with them and Clare wiped the floor with them as well. And it's not like a Limerick that's wiping the floor with them. It's not like favourites to win the All-Ireland. So yeah, it's hard to know where they go from here with regards to shaking up the panel. Is there much of a shake-up needed? Maybe it seems like they're operating out of the same pool of players the last 4 years. That kind of looks that way as well. Is there much other talent there? I'd say there's a few from Chelmsford maybe that could come in as well. But kind of hard to know where they go from here. It'll be a massive job done by Davy if he's able to turn it around next year and get some sort of silverware or get to an All-Ireland final or something like that, because things are pretty low at the moment.
Yeah, and we don't want to do the whole captain hindsight and say you should have done this, you should have done the other, and you might have won the game. But last week we did say Matt O'Hanlon, is he the man for Tony Kelly? He's going to run away from him over the course of the game. And just to always kind of frame this in the context that we put it, we've always said he's an excellent player. He's done really good jobs against TJ Reid. He's done great jobs on Joe Canning. He's obviously a really, really good player. But is he the right matchup? Styles makes fights, and this one didn't make sense. Like, think of how Tony Kelly ran away from him in the second half, that 80-yard solo. Nobody's probably going to keep into him. But definitely, is he your fastest player? Is he the fastest player on your team? I don't think so. And to be honest, we had called that out. I also would like to say I called out the fact that I didn't entirely rule Clare out winning this game. I will say that I tipped Wexford, but Tony Kelly talked afterwards about how everyone had written us off because of the Laois performance, and they were septic against Laois. But a lot of that was down to 14 men, and even more double credit that David McInerney was suspended because of that game, and they won without him, and Jason McCarthy came in midfield, and I thought he was brilliant. And just to kind of reference some of what Tony Kelly said, and Tony Kelly has been unbelievable. If the hurler of the year was being picked today, he's it, and there's no one else even being nominated. He scored 145 in 3 games. But he said a lot of the talk was that Wexford were going to get the show on the road this week and build up their own momentum. We were probably written off fairly or unfairly, but we knew ourselves that there was a performance in us. At the start of the year, we were moving nicely. The layoff then didn't really help. Last week, a lot was written about us only beating Laois by a point, but coming in Tuesday, we felt it was a small bit disrespectfully, firstly towards Laois, secondly towards ourselves. A win is a win in championship no matter who you beat. Even that small bit of momentum last week helped again this week, especially with the conditions. We knew if we won the toss we could build up a bit of a lead. It's hard to come back from that lead no matter what it is. We built up that cushion, and a goal is a massive score in those conditions.
Yeah, I suppose it was the perfect storm for Clare in many respects. The favourites tag had fell on a team who gave a complete non-performance against Galway, whereas maybe, but in hindsight, when you look at it, Clare had performed pretty well against Limerick and had put it up to them up until half time, even though maybe it was, the Tony Kelly show. But maybe we need to place less stock in the Tony Kelly show. If it's a Tony Kelly show every day you go out, then that's a different story. If nobody can stop him, which looks like the case at the moment, then maybe we're not giving Clare the credit they deserve. But there was definitely a lot of other lads that added a lot the other day. And I think, in fairness to Kelly, he pinpointed Shane O'Donnell.
Did, yeah.
If you're talking about selfless players, I'd say we should probably do a video on who are the top three selfish players. I'd probably have Will O'Donoghue up there, and Shane O'Donnell would probably be nearly a close second, I'd say as well.
Dan McCormick? Are we putting Dan McCormick
in
there?
Dan McCormick's not a bad one now as well, yeah. I'd say they're probably the top three, but they're guys, like O'Donnell just went out and did the hard graft. Went out and threw his body in, got hooks and blocks in, hand passes in, wasn't, unbelievably effective on the scoreboard. But that just shows the kind of strings to his bow, like. And I just put it to you this way as well. Has anybody taken the pressure and everything that came with the 2013 All-Ireland final performance better than him? He's like, you think he should be a flair player after that. His name in lights. In a way, he doesn't want his name in lights. He has no problem doing all the other hard yards. I thought he was outstanding the other day. And just on Kelly as well. Kelly scored a point from 6 yards out, I'd say. He was closer to the sideline or to the end line than he was to the 13. And someone said in a tweet response to me, I thought he was actually going to try and strike it from behind or past the end line. And he would. It was just one of those days. He struck a ball over his shoulder on the terrace side, on his left-hand side. It's absolutely outrageous. He looks like a guy who has basically, he's seen that Colin Galvin's not there. He's seen the Podges in there. He's seen the Peter Duggan in there. He's seen John Connellis in there. And I'm not saying that he wasn't taking games with a scruffed neck before, but I think he might have just realised, okay, I just need to be on the whole time. I need to be Ballyea Tony Kelly every day I go out for Clare. And he's literally done that. He's been absolutely out of this world. And as you say, if Player of the Year has been picked now, it's him. If he delivers a big quarter-final performance and they win, it could still be him. Even if they don't get to an All-Ireland final, he could still conceivably be Player of the Year.
From 16 shots, he scored 115. Sorry, from 18 shots, he scored 115. Yeah. 16 out of 18, it converts to 18 points out of a total of 121, which is 24. I mean, has a team ever leaned so heavily on one guy? And it's not just all him now. He mentioned Shane O'Donnell, and you kind of touched on that as well. Cathal Malone was very good. Their backs were very good. They didn't, like, their work rate was so good. You couldn't give Clare enough credit for this. Now, whether they can go on and convert this into another victory over Waterford, I think it is the best possible draw they could have got. I mean, they didn't want to have to face Galway, did they?
No, realistically, no, I don't think so.
Or Tipperary, obviously.
Yeah, they're playing a Waterford side who emptied the tank against Limerick, and Clare know how difficult it is to play against Limerick and how physically demanding it is to play against Limerick. So, I believe Waterford are like 1 to 2 favourites at the moment. To me, that's a 50-50 game, and as good as Waterford were yesterday, they probably don't have, would say, a Canning or a Reid. They don't have, one guy in particular that's going to really, really hurt you on the scoreboard. Like Stephen Bennett's going to do that from freeze. So I think Clare will definitely fancy themselves. They're coming in, like, imagine, like, being honest with you, if Clare get to an All-Ireland semi-final, I'd probably eat my hat, because I didn't think they'd do anything this year, and that's just being honest. And I don't think either of us did really. But now they're coming, the Clare side coming with momentum, really, really dangerous, really, really dangerous. Fair play to Brian Lohan as well. He obviously got the win over Davy at the weekend. I don't know if that was in his motivation or anything like that, but he definitely helped him produce a big performance. And while at times maybe we've questioned, tactically what they're doing, and maybe some naiveties and things like that, there's definitely, when Brian Lohan is charged, they're not going to roll over. They're not going to want for energy and aggression and work rate, and they definitely haven't wanted for that so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony Kelly was saying afterwards about the team all going over and exchanging pleasantries with Davy Fitz, and he said we've massive respect for Davy and Bugs, who's Brendan Bugler, who's a selector with Wexford this year and obviously won an All-Ireland with Clare. He said we've massive respect for Davy and Bugs. I teach with him inside in school for so many years. We've massive respect to them. We grew up watching Fitzgerald play for Clare, and we idolised that team, and then as a manager won an All-Ireland under him. It was absolutely fantastic, and we may never win one again. We didn't have to think about it. If we met them on the street, it would be the same thing. And when, like Henry Shefflin said last night, that they look like they're training too hard and they're overcoached, and there was talk of being off the pace in a big way in 2 games and that. Do you think they look over, like you touched on it at the start, are they overcoached? I mean, is there too little reliance on just get the ball into Conor MacDonald? I mean, a lot of teams just say, Kilkenny and say, get that ball into TJ Reid. Obviously, that's not exactly how it panned out in the Leinster final, but get the ball to your main shooters and get it to them as quickly as possible. Are they doing too much messing around?
I think so, to be honest with you, particularly this time of the year. Like Shane, at the end of the day, right, if you're delivering intricate passes out in the middle of the field, like, you can't score a goal. If you put the ball in the edge of the square, you have a chance of scoring. You have a chance of, keeper making a mistake and things like that. I just think it was, far too kind of formulaic, and they were just trying to, I don't know, it was just totally over the top to me, particularly at this time of the year. And even with maybe their confidence a bit down after the Galway performance as well. I'm not saying to be leaving in long ball and stuff like that, far from it, but to vary the game a bit. Just, it didn't really look like anybody wanted to take the responsibility on, or anybody wanted to take the shot on. Another one as well, I give Rory Hayes a lot of credit. He's a tigerish defender. He kept Rory O'Connor on a fairly tight leash throughout as well. So Clare have kind of unearthed a few of those kind of guys as well, lads maybe that have gotten exposure this year that maybe otherwise wouldn't if that quartet that I mentioned earlier on weren't missing. So yeah, Clare coming in a nice position playing Waterford this weekend. That's a real intriguing quarter final.
So are Clare the real deal now, or is it a case that they lumbered past a Laois team after getting a red card, did what they needed to do? Do we ignore the fact that Limerick beat them by 10 points, or do we say, well, there was actually some good in that? The fact that they weren't able to contain Kelly, the fact that people probably thought we'd lose by even more, and maybe we've played 3 games now, and we've got confidence coming into this next game against the Waterford team that's just been beaten. How far can this Clare team go, and what more does Tony Kelly need to do to win Player of the Year? I think if he has one more sterling performance, if Clare win and he's good against Waterford, which you can imagine he would have to be, and then has a good semi-final, I think it'll be nigh on impossible not to give him Hurler of the Year, especially considering it won't be like a normal year whereby if you get knocked out in a quarter-final or a semi-final, by the time the final is played, it's felt like ancient history. It'll only have been 2 to 3 weeks since we last saw him play when the season is over.
Yeah, he's going to have 4 games played, possibly 5, possibly 6. He could well be championship top scorer as well.
Yeah,
so
and Kilkenny will play. If Kilkenny win the All-Ireland, they'll have played 4 games in total.
That's a fact, yeah. No, that's true too, yeah. This year is different anyway. I don't think like the more than the time Austin Gleeson won it in 16. This year is a little bit different, and I think, like, if he delivers a big quarter-final performance, even in defeat, I think he'd still have a shout. Like, who's been better than him so far? Probably Garrod Hager. Not better than him. Who's in the conversation at the moment? Possibly maybe Garrod Hager.
Nobody's in the conversation. And hey, look, nobody's had more pops at Clare than me over the years, but nobody's in the conversation at the moment.
Nobody's in the same conversation as him at the moment, yeah. It'll be like Limerick are obviously in a semi-final now as well, so you're eliminating games. Like, if Tipperary have anyone that could win Hurler of the Year? Not at the moment, anyway.
Hey. Keep an eye on it.
But listen, he's going to be there or thereabouts. Are Clare the real deal? I think they're the real deal for what they have. I think they're maxing out what they have. I think they're playing fairly high to the potential of what they have. Are they the real deal? Can they win the All-Ireland from here? Honestly, no. I still could not see them win the All-Ireland. I think they're a really dangerous proposition at the weekend, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see them get through to the semi-final.
I'll tell you, if they win this All-Ireland, they'll have fairly shoved it up to anyone who doubted them this year, and this All-Ireland would never be questioned because you're doing it the hardest way possible. Do I think they'll win it? No. And I think if they don't get beaten this weekend, they will get beaten the following weekend. But you just never know, and it'll be intriguing to see. And if Tony Kelly gets back to Croke Park as well, we know what he's like there. And like even the league final that he, I would say, won more or less by himself in 2016 against Waterford. Remember that went to a replay. He was absolutely sensational that day. He is, and that was in Semple Stadium. But we know he's a player who's built for Croke Park. And it'll be interesting to see where these games are fixed for. By the time you watch this video, maybe it'll have been announced. But we'll wait and see on that. For Wexford, yeah, it's going to be a short winter in terms of being back training fairly soon. But there'll be a period of introspection required. And, I mean, you can't just lose one player and leach in and have the team fall apart. But it's been a process of 2 games of basically watching a team that was so good last year falling apart. They have a lot they're going to need to fix. And maybe over the course of the league, which doesn't really matter if they win the league next year or not. You don't want to get relegated, but probably, look, sure, it doesn't really matter that much anyway. The chances are highly unlikely of getting relegated. But yeah, they're going to have a sobering Christmas anyway. We'll move on to Tipperary's win over Cork, 218 to 117 down in Limerick. Another rain-sodden day. but it clearly meant so much to Liam Sheedy. You were down there, everything was on the line. People were talking about, was last year's All-Ireland. You need to back that up to some degree. You got hammered by Limerick. Maybe you were just lucky that you didn't have to play them in the final. Kilkenny did all the hard work for you. Limerick have your number. I think everything was on the line here. And when things weren't going well, Tipperary found a way out. Now, you were down there. What was it even like down there, the conditions?
Conditions were probably, it's hard to describe how bad they were, to be honest with you. Post shaking, the first 15-20 minutes, it wasn't even a deluge. It just never stopped. The wind was hard to describe how strong the wind was, nearly, to be honest with you as well. Funny kind of a game, and to me, an unbelievable game for Tipp to win. So in the first half, I don't know if there was a bit of a hangover from the Limerick game or whatever, but they were taking kind of pot shots, and it's very unusual to see Tipp hit 12 wides in the first half. When the whole, it's like the Red Sea opening when Patrick Harden came through, picked up the ball at 65, the whole thing just opened up for him, and you're thinking, Cork are in some position here now. They've had 8 shots on goal. They've scored 1-4. They're 2 points down at half time. Seamus Callanan, the hurler of the year, hasn't scored in a game and a half of hurling. Jason Ford is the only Tipp forward to have scored from play. John McGrath is taken off. Noel McGrath is taken off on the hour mark, completely absent. And then, but after half time, then Tipp just showed a bit more. Like the ball in the first half into the full forward line was atrocious, and the full forward line was vacated a lot of the time as well, and Mark Coleman was kind of sitting back. In the second half, Callanan, I know we've talked about it before, him picking the ball up a bit too far away from goals, but he kind of had to the other day. Coleman was sitting right back in there, so the ball was more, they were kind of, the two full forwards are kind of more coming out kind of like that, and he got far more influential into the game, got a couple of scores off Damien Callanan. Colm Spillane, who I've bigged up several times, if there was one player that I thought Jason Ford wouldn't beat to get the goal, it was probably Colm Spillane. I probably thought he would have taken him down. Now there was borderline maybe steps there, but then Cork responded, and on the hour mark Horgan puts over a 65 and Cork are a point up. Dara Fitzgibbons, after coming on, looks really, really lively. Robbie O'Flynn is after scoring a monster of a point. Harnady's after giving Niall O'Mara all sorts of trouble.
Wrong.
And then
he wasn't on him. I watched it back a second time. He swapped man a few times. He got one off. He only got one off Niall O'Mara. Anyway, go on.
Okay, when he switched into the centre, there was nobody marking him if that was the case. But Paddy was picking him up for the last 10 or 15 minutes and totally snuffed him out. He didn't get in the game at all. And that's not to say Niall O'Mara didn't have a good game. Thought he was very solid and got on a lot of dirty ball. But then in the last 10 or 15 minutes, Tipp it was almost like backs to the wall, season is on the line here, and a couple of lads really, really stood up. Thought Alan Flynn was very good in defence. Ronan Matter was superb at full back. Plucked a couple of balls over Horgan's head. Horgan never got a sniff at in the second half. And it was new faces, like Michael Breen didn't play the last day, 5 points, outstanding. Dan McCormack didn't play the last day, 2 points. Willie Connors off the bench, just class. Set up 1-3, a lovely catch and a hand pass, beautiful. Jake Morris, who had done, without being smart, had done so many things badly throughout the game, but persisted. He obviously has serious belief in his talent, because he just stayed going and going. He took that ball on, really a ballsy kind of a ball to take on. Brilliant finish. And then Paul Flynn came in as well, obviously Alan's twin brother. Lovely interplay between him and Willie Connors for that last point. But all the new faces stood up, and I think that's big for Tipp going forward for this year and even for future years as well. Like if you look at the lads that stood up, probably nobody under the age of probably 27, I'd say, or nobody over the age of 27. Paul Flynn, Willie Connors, Alan Flynn, Dan McCormack, Michael Breen, Ronan Matter, all the younger kind of lights kind of stood up. So that's why I take a good bit of optimism out of it for Tipp.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those players there. There's a big, and like we talked about how maybe Wexford could use more of their county champions, like Shelmaliers won it this year. 4 Kildagan players on the field for Tipperary, a club that you wouldn't normally associate with having too many lining out with the county. Billy Seymour also came on towards the very end of the game, and I believe Jason Ford came off with a little niggly injury, so that's something that Sheedy will be concerned about. And I mean, he didn't really do too much again in the Limerick game, but he scored 1-1 from play here. He hit most of his frees. He missed a couple, but like you've described the conditions there, to be knocking over the ones he did knock over was hugely encouraging, and something that you need a safe pair of hands over the frees at this time of the year. Again, coming back to Wexford, that was the issue there for them. And even a further time to mention Wexford, it was the game against them last year that launched Tipperary to win that All-Ireland, because they hadn't been overly impressive in Munster. I mean, they had in some of the games, but then the Munster final absolutely rocketed by Limerick, then laboured over Laois. Then all of a sudden you're under the cosh against Davy Fitzgerald's team, pull it out of the fire, and you're back to where you want to be. And Seamus Callanan spoke on our game a few weeks ago. You can check out the interview, and he was talking about how knockout hurling is where Tipperary come alive. 2019 winning the All-Ireland, 2010, even 2014 getting back through the qualifiers. But the problem now is it's such breakneck speed in terms of, like, you've had Cork, then you week off, then you've got Galway, and then if you go along form lines, you're probably going to have Limerick, and then again, if it goes to the bookies' form, you're going to have Kilkenny. So it's an unbelievably tough task. But having watched the game back, and I watched it back without sound, just to make all my own judgments on how some of the players for Tipperary played, and by and large, as a Tipperary person, I'd have been very encouraged by what I've seen. I think Tipperary probably are still there for the taking to some degree, but I thought Niall O'Mara was brilliant at wing back. I thought he was absolutely class, and I think that probably wasn't stated enough in the commentary or afterwards or whatever. Like, he's such a good decision maker. He's used to the ball, getting on it so often. He should have hooked Patrick Horgan for the goal, no doubt about that.
He was unlucky, yeah. He made up serious ground on him.
Yeah, but there's no unlucky. You should have had him. You should have stopped him. And I mean, I'm saying he was my man of the match from a Tipperary point of view. And maybe you can say Willie Connors came in and his chop flick up before he handed it on for Jake Morris for the goal was important. Jake Morris, some of his touches are incredible. Like, the final ball didn't work out for him an awful lot of times. But he, like you said, he persevered. And the way he sold it through for the goal, I had no doubt he was going to bury it when he was going through, because he's like a new Lara Corbett for Tipperary. And I don't say that sort of flippantly, because we've seen it the last year or two. Some of these flashes came on Croke Park last year, had a goal disallowed against Wexford when it was brought back for a free. He had a goal scored in an All-Ireland semi-final. Earlier in the summer, he was terrible against Cork in the Munster Under-20 final. Last second of the game, buries a ball into the back of the net, and you never had any doubt he was going to score. I think he's just one of those players who's able to punch the ball into the net when it matters. And he's only 20 years of age. Maybe he's just gone 21. And, like, his talent is, like, going out centre forward as well, and the half forward line. He probably interchanged a bit. I thought he had a big impact out there. I think he was really good. I also have to say, I think Callanan was brilliant. And I don't think people would appreciate the job he did there. He won 4 or 5 frees. Oh my God. Like, midway through the second half, he looked like he was ready to calve. He looked like he was hands on the hips. It was like watching Damien Duff, when Damien Duff was out, playing soccer for Ireland. But like that, Tipperary gave themselves so much hard work to do here. The first half of the game, the backs had 7 wides. I mean, if we wanted you shooting, we'd have you in the forwards. Just play the ball into Callanan, look short for forward, look short for whoever, and let them throw it over the bar. In conditions like that, I know you have the wind with you, but stop hitting the ball wide, because you've got Cork where you want them. What will tell you about Tipp dominating a lot of that game is that Cork played with a sweeper from the get-go, and we'll come to that in a minute. And Mark Coleman barely had a puck of the ball a week after being sensational against Dublin. So it said to me that Tipperary got an awful lot right. And again, they're not flowing at 100%, and they were destroyed by Limerick. But that was really encouraging, and I think the team that started against Limerick the first day will be very different to the team that either gets knocked out of the championship or maybe gets all the way.
Yeah, can I just say to you as well, when you saw the Tipperary team announced, how much happier were you? Because when I'm obviously not a Tipperary fan.
You hate it.
As you well know, but I saw Alan Flynn cornerback and said, yeah, he's the pace to stick with one of the Cork defenders as well. We didn't mention the Bonner. I thought the Bonner had a brilliant 50 minutes, I have to say.
Yeah, without doubt. I saw people online questioning me when I said, Bonner's been really good. He won so much ball early on. It was all the lads who didn't start the previous day. Bonner, Breen, Dan McCormick, Alan Flynn, Willie Connors coming on. I know I'm forgetting someone else there, but it was all the guys who hadn't started the previous day.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I thought all the new faces stood up, and I think that's really promising from obviously for future years. But I also think Paddy was getting back to himself. I thought even in the last 15 minutes, I thought he had a big influence on things. The Killadangan thing, the flip side of that is the Lockmore lads. Is that Noel and John look to be struggling at the moment.
They played 11 weeks in a row in the club championship, and maybe it's telling And maybe coming off early is no harm for John McGrath. Maybe for Noel even coming off 10 minutes early. And you even wonder, will that inform the decision making of the team selection against Galway the next day? I can't see him ever dropping Noel McGrath. Even if he had a leg amputated, I can't see him not starting Noel McGrath. But there's I think he will stick with John McGrath, and I think history has shown that he's a player who's going to deliver for you on the big days. But he might look at tweaking the team a little bit to maybe bring in Willie Connors. Now,
it's hard, Shane. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to get the balance between rewarding a lad that came in and then possibly taking away that influence that he had off the bench. It's like I'll give you a classic example, and I'm not having a go at him in any way. Trollier Dillon is a classic example. So he came in 2 games. It was outstanding, turn games for Dublin. Then he started, found it quite tough. The ball coming in was absolutely brutal, and then they had nobody coming in off the bench. So it's a balancing act. I'd still say, well, Noel will definitely start. John McGrath, I don't know. I would imagine those 2 guys won't do much. I don't know they won't do much training this week anyway, the team. But I wouldn't say those 2 lads will do much training at all. I think it's freshness now at this stage that they need. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they were told not to pick up their hurls until Thursday or Friday and come into the game really, really fresh. But as well as that, Shane, they have Barry Heffernan coming back. He'll be closer. He'll have a chance of featuring. Seamus Kennedy will have a chance of featuring as well. I wasn't overly impressed with the Tipp bench when I saw it. Just when I saw outside of the top 15, but I think there's a couple of guys there maybe that could come in and improve that bench even a bit more. And then if you have Willie Connors and Paul Flynn coming in, I'd be optimistic enough. Like I think that Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon could potentially be a season turner for Tipperary. That's my own kind of thoughts on it. Like, do you think they can win All Ireland from here?
Oh, I think they're so up against it. You know I want to scream yes. You know I do. But you can't ignore the route that lays before them, and the fact that having been beaten so heavily by Limerick, so much of the team has to come right, obviously, to get up to the level of a Limerick. And obviously Kilkenny beat Limerick last year, so to get up to their level. And I mean, obviously these styles make fights and all that kind of stuff we keep talking about, because Tipperary beat Kilkenny well in the final. But Galway are a team that always trouble Tipperary. We'll preview that on the hurling show on Thursday. But a lot has to come right. But what you would say is a fair bit has come right already. Like Ronan Maher dominated the exchanges against Patrick Horgan. Horgan got his goal on the basis of a beautiful steal. Michael Breen had hand passed it out of a ruck. Brendan Maher was going for it, and Horgan, with the swiftest wrist you'll see, he stole it, ran through, and a nice little finish. I mean, he should have been hooped, but a nice little finish. I think a fair bit is coming right for Tipp, but a bit more has to come right again. I think they'd love to play on a day where isn't as stormy and wintry as it has been against both Limerick and Cork. But maybe that's the test of character you need. You're not going to go from being a team that gets destroyed to being back on top in the space of one game, are you? So I think as much as Liam Sheedy could have got from his team in terms of a turnaround in just a couple of weeks, he's gotten. I think he's coming away from that and he's feeling really good about his chances comparatively.
No, I think so too. And like a point win, a penalties win, any sort of a win at the weekend, and they big momentum again. And as I said in the qualifier video, like it was a 1-point defeat of Galway in 2010 that spawned that stopping the drive to 5 as well. So it's literally just a matter of getting over the line at the weekend. But yeah, definitely I think they've turned the corner a bit. And I think you will get an awful lot more out of their bigger players against the likes of a Galway in a big game as well. Possibly in better conditions too.
Let's talk about Cork. It's Act 2, Season 1 for Kieran Kingston. He was without both Cadigans. Owen Cadigan crucial at the back. Alan Cadigan, like you can imagine, he would have done a bit of damage in the forward line if he got ball in there. Have they made any improvements this year? Has he found a 3? Has he found a 6? Has he added some steel to the team? I think the half back line is looking as shaky as ever. Playing with a sweeper, I can understand it doing it in the first half, but for my money, watching it on TV, he stuck with that throughout the vast majority of the game, maybe changed towards the end of the game. Did you see enough from Cork, both in the Munster Championship defeat to Waterford, where they lost by 4 points, in the heavy win over Dublin, and in this defeat to Tipperary? Did you see enough for them to suggest that Kieran Kingston has come in and made a difference?
Oh, it's difficult. Like, what would have been two of the big things I would have said coming in? Has he found a 3 and has he found a 6? Damien Callahan ended up playing full back the other day on Seamus Callan. It was obviously due to a match-up, and he did all right. They probably not cancel each other out, but they both had decent games. We still don't really know who's going to be playing centre back. So like that was one of the big questions I'm sure he would have had in his head coming in. Who are my 3? Who are my 6? Can I get my forwards to work a bit harder? They worked an awful lot harder, but they got themselves into a position to win the game on the hour mark. And the big worry for Cork is, what did Tipp do? Tipp brought them into the trenches and squeezed the life out of them, and they had no response to it. And by the end of it, like it was 4 points, but it was a comfortable 4 points. Like after Jake Morris's goal went in, you'd know if the game was over to me then. And Cork were kind of trying to force a goal.
Were they bullied?
Were
Cork bullied? I noticed that 3 or 4 times in the game their players were down for treatment, whereas and like that was through just taking heavy hits. So I wondered, were they bullied to some degree?
I'm not sure about that, but Tipp's approach was totally different. They had different types of players on the pitch, and we said before, like Dan McCormick, Michael Breen, Bonner Matter, just big physical brutes of players. Breen was outstanding, particularly when a lot of other guys weren't doing it up top. And I think Sheedy is stumbling across his team no more than he did last year and no more than he did in 2010. I think he's stumbling across his best team, and he should have more options with Heffernan and Kendi possibly available this weekend as well. But from a Cork point of view, like Kingston said after, like we know that we're capable of now, and competing and this kind of crack. Jesus, if Cork don't know that they can compete with the top teams, there's something seriously off there. The day probably wouldn't have suited them again. Kingston seems to think it's a myth that that they're soft and they don't like winter hurling or whatever. But I think the other day they were probably, what's the best way? You'd say they were dogged out of it at the end. That they were dogged out of it in the last 10 or 13 minutes, 10 to 13 minutes. The likes of Paddy and that got in some big hits. It just didn't, and I can't overstate it. Ronan Matter, particularly in that second half, he just was walking out with ball. Thought he was absolutely outstanding. Alan Flynn done a brilliant man-marking job on Kingston when he was on him too. Really, really negated his influence. Like Hardy came into it for the third quarter, hit 4 points in the space of about from half time to maybe the 54th minute, and then didn't have much of an influence thereafter. They were. I'm not saying it was white line fever, but the game was there to be won, and they just didn't kick on. So I don't know if Kingston knows exactly where he is now, really. Like, is he any the wiser at this stage as he was last year before he took the job? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, we'll put it like this. He's had 3 seasons in charge of the team, 2016, 2017 and 2020, and 2 out of the 3 have been very poor, and 1 he got to an All-Ireland semi-final and the team capitulated. So, I mean, there's a Munster title in there as well. But you have to balance those things out. He has an awful lot to do. There's a couple of news just as we're talking. Clare versus Watford, one of the quarterfinals. That's going to be at Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Saturday at 3:45. Tipperary against Galway. That's confirmed for Saturday at 1:15 in the Gaelic grounds. So back to the wintry weather in the Gaelic grounds, you might imagine. But you're talking about Cork there, and it's just nothing but question marks. You look at the players they have, and it seems like too many silky players and not enough ignorant pigs. And Owen Cadigan not being available is certainly going to hurt them in that respect. Keeping the sweeper for so long when you have that wind in the second half. Now, you were there, so you could probably see the flow of the game and where players were picking up their positions a little bit more. But like Patrick Horgan got dogged out of it by Ronan Maher, and out hurled as well, I'd have to say, just getting to the ball first. And Ronan Maher catching that ball at the end of the game, like just rose like a salmon, came out, and it actually looked like Shane Kingston had been just, do you ever see like somebody when they're running along and then like it's a game show, a bungee cord just pulls them back and they go flying backwards, and it's almost like a comedic effect or something like that. He just hit the ground like I don't know, he just flew backwards, and Ronan knocked it straight up the field. I
think just quickly, Shane, as well, Declan Dalton was forced off injured in the 50th minute. I didn't realise he was injured at the time. We only found out after. They need a couple of players like him. They need a bit of substance.
He was down, and it looked like he needed treatment as well because he had gotten rattled. So, I mean, did that feed into the point of getting dogged out of it, we'll say. But if you, just to go through a couple of the players that Tipperary had that I was impressed with, like Paul Flynn coming on. And in the past, he hadn't fully kind of proven that he was for this level. But he came on and he scored 2 great points. One in the corner where he turned his man and knocked it over lovely with a nice little step. And what said to me that this guy was ready for this stage was when Lockmore were all over Kildangan in the county final, and he was the guy scoring the points that kept them alive when they were really struggling. I think he ended up with like 7 or 8 from play that day, so that was sensational stuff. And said to me, here's a guy ready for the big stage. You mentioned Alan Flynn, and a couple of times on terrible, like in terrible conditions, Shane Kingston tried to show him one way and go the other, and he managed to keep his feet, which I don't think should be overstated or underestimated here. Now, he gave away a free on Jack O'Connor another stage, and he was one of the lads who hit a couple of wides and that sort of stuff. But when he was in the back line, I thought he was good. I thought he was very secure in possession. I think there's probably a couple of lads in the back line that could probably perform a little bit better. But feeding into Ronan Maher having the versatility to mark a guy no matter where he's going. I mean, if you're looking at a matchup for Ronan Maher, you don't necessarily want to drag him out the field because he can score from anywhere. And he did have a few wides, but in general, on a decent day, he's going to knock them over. But if Barry Heffernan comes back into the reckoning, he's got that versatility around the back line. You wouldn't care where he plays if you're Liam Sheedy, no matter where his marker drags him. If Seamus Kennedy comes back in, he wasn't named on the panel the last day, but he was supposed to be back training, I'd say about 5 or 6 days ago at this stage. Whether he is or not is another thing. You wouldn't really get that information out. But Tipperary, if they can beat Galway this weekend, and it's a big ask, and we'll preview it later in the week, it's a 50-50 game. But if you can have those guys available, and if the likes of Willie Connors is stepping up, and if the likes of Paul Flynn is coming in and doing his thing, and if Dan McCormick and Breen and all these guys have come into the team, you can imagine that all of a sudden Liam Sheedy has got an awful lot of options. Now, he has a heavy fixture list ahead of him if he wants to win in All-Ireland, but he must feel like he's coming back to getting the team back to where it should be.
No, I think so. Yeah, I don't think he'd be too public about it, but I think he'd be happy enough with where they are now. Like everything was on the line there. Like, it would have been a disastrous season for Tipperary to have gone out of the championship without winning a game. Another, failed All-Ireland back-to-back attempt. Now they're kind of quietly going about their business, and as I said to you, like, nobody's talking about Tipperary really. And everyone's going to be talking about, can they get over Galway? And it's like whoever wins that game will have a big say in things or whatever. But I think they're going about things quietly enough, and they were steeled the other day. They were really, really steeled. When the game was there to be won, they were the ones that took it by the scruff of the neck. And the fact that they have, like, Jake Morris is a real ballsy player to me. He's such belief in his own talent. And to have the gumption to go and take a ball on like that, not even hesitate. Like, if they blend those new faces that played well on Saturday with the experienced lads that we're used to producing over the last 10 to 12 years, they're a dangerous prospect to me. Just a matter, from Chile's point of view, it's just a matter of doing whatever is possible to get over the line at the weekend. And I think that's why that's going to be such an interesting game, because it's probably going to be a classic, number one, and they just match up so well. It'll probably be a free scoring enough game. And just like Paulie will be coming up against maybe a Joe Canning, and it'll just be a load of really good players over the last 10 years on the same pitch.
Yeah, and just a couple of quick other points before finishing up on this and moving on is Cathal Barrett, I think, was brilliant in the corner back line. Another thing I want to mention is just get your thoughts on Cork and the way they set up. I mean, you had Mark Coleman a sweeper and Bill Cooper went wing back, but Tipperary in the second half, having only been 2 points ahead with a massive wind, they had a point, then they had a couple of bad wides from frees from Ford at the sideline, Brian Hogan from like massive distance. Even a little bit later on, Tipperary had a chance to score at one end. Harnedy gets a point, and it's pretty quickly bring it back to just a 2 point game, and ultimately are ahead by the hour mark. Do you think that Cork going for a sweeper for so long, did that add to their own trouble? Could they have gone man to man a bit earlier, especially when they had the wind? Were they doing the right thing? Did they lose it a bit on the sideline? What were your thoughts?
No, but like the sweeper thing, like they were up and had turned around a 5 point deficit by the hour mark. So I'm not sure about that. I genuinely.
So that went to plan. That went to plan per se. They were they were patient enough to get themselves back in and not panic too soon.
I think it's very simplistic, Shane, to be honest with you. I think that plan got them to within a chance of winning the game. And I just think when the game was there to be won, they were outscored 1-4 to 2 points. They scored 2 points in the last 13 minutes of the game. And one of them, I think, was a Pat Horgan free. So they scored a point from play in the last 13 minutes. and that's not going to be good enough to beat anybody. And sorry, the last point they got was in the 73rd minute. Bill Cooper put over a point in the last minute, so they basically scored essentially nothing in the last 13 minutes.
And incredibly, in the second half, when you think that, you know, Tipperary had all the chances in the first half, they created 21-8 and only were 2 points ahead. Tipperary only created one chance fewer in the second half, 19-18. So overall, Cork only created 27 chances, scoring 18. Tipperary 39, scoring 20. Now that was a bit Pat Spillanish, giving you an unbelievable amount of stats in the one time, but at the same time it was important. So yeah, Cork, it's another tight game that they've let go, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Even like Davy Fitz, I actually gave him a 7 in my ratings coming on, because for the first 10-15 minutes on the field he had a massive impact, and he was kind of half nearly fouled for a goal chance as well, and I think he had 2 shots where they were pulled back and they got frees, but his kind of influence, everyone's influence waned once they went ahead. Very, very strange from them. I don't know if you'd call it a collapse. I'm not sure. I just think Tipperary dogged them out of it in the last 10 to 30 minutes of the game.
Yeah. We'll move on now to the Joe McDonagh Cup, where Antrim saw off Kerry 3-18 to 2-14, and they were always kind of in charge in this game. I think they had some of those goals got early on. They were 3-10 to 1-6 up at the break. And Darren Gleeson, who's the manager of Antrim, he said afterwards, "It's a cliche, but they died in their boots for us. We have crucial players who aren't playing, and people are asking why. It's because they're not being put on the field because other players are doing it. They're great for us. We've been putting up great scores all year, and in the second half when Kerry got their purple patch, we came back really well. It's a good measure of the boys and the leadership of the team." So a huge win for Antrim. They continue what is some really good form this year.
Yeah, they have kind of 1 foot in the final now, because they have head-to-head advantage on Kerry. So Kerry will have to beat Carlow when they play them. I'm not sure if that's this weekend or the weekend after. That's essentially a de facto kind of semi-final. Antrim are in a good spot at the moment. They basically carried that 2A form from the league into championship. They're putting up huge scores. Like Conor McCann got 2-3 at the weekend, and as I said, like him, James McNaughton, you have big Donal Nugent at the edge of the square when he comes in as well. They're putting up really, really big scores, and it's looking like they're going to be there on All Ireland final day as well. And if they were to win that, they'd be into the Leinster Championship. The winners of the Joe McDonagh, as we said last week, are straight into the Leinster Championship this year, or next year, even if it's Kerry. So Kerry and Carlow is the big game really now. That's a semi-final, huge game. You'd be probably edging Carlow in that one, but even like at the weekend, Shane Conway was brilliant again. 1-7, 1-4 from play. When one of your best guys is going well, and the other teams still have, you know, a foothold against you and are dominant against you, that's probably saying a lot about the strength of Antrim at the moment. And like anybody talking to anyone in Antrim hurling circles, they just think they're really, really well coached. They're after developing a squad. They're after developing players. They're basically after getting everyone from the strong club competition in around the county scene. They're after getting everyone to buy into it. And they're going really, really well. And they're probably favourites. If they're in the final already, they're probably favourites to win the Joe McDonagh now at this stage.
Yeah, they're looking good, and they're up in first division in the league as well. So it's all going well for Darren Gleeson there. A man it's not going well for is Michael Verney, for his county manager, Michael Fennelly, because Offaly, I think it's pretty much unthinkable to lose the Christy Ring Cup semi-final. They lost on penalties to Down, having been 2-0 up even in the penalty shootout. But Offaly were supposed to coast this and get back up to the Joe McDonagh. I mean, it was only the last day, even getting relegated last year by Kerry, to not win this. Like, how do you explain this?
You don't really. I was kind of thinking in my head, you know that song, Down, Down, Deeper and Down? That's like our fortunes at the moment. It's like people thought like various results over the last couple of years. Westmeath hammering them in the Leinster Championship, Galway putting, you know, crazy amount of points on them in O'Moore Park, and then getting relegated last year. People think they're all, you've hit rock bottom. Like, to me, this is as close as you're going to get to rock bottom. We could get closer, hopefully we won't. But like, to not be getting to the final of a third tier championship, having played Leinster Championship 2 years ago, is disastrous. There's no point in saying any different. And the most worrying part of it all is that at no stage in the game did it look like we were really going to pull away. And there was a couple of contentious things. Owen Cattle hit a penalty, and from his point of view and from a lot of people's point of view and from video evidence point of view, it does look like it hit the back stanchion. This is a penalty in normal time, and it was ruled. It was ruled that it hadn't anyway, but that looked fairly contentious. Now that's not sour grapes or anything like that, because from a Down point of view, Down were brilliant. Offaly had this. Offaly were playing a possession style game that a lot of top teams wouldn't even try to play. So we're playing, strike, hand pass, break a tackle, hand pass, off the shoulder, loads of this kind of thing.
Sounds like Limerick style of play.
Yeah, and what's the main difference between Limerick and Offaly? A massive, massive class difference, a massive difference in physical conditioning as well. Like, I just don't think, I know they're trying to do it for the right reason, but I just don't think that's going to be that. If we had the players to play that style really, really effectively, would we be in the Christie Ring? I don't think we would be. So that kind of broke down time and time again, and Down were able to get turnovers and were kind of buoyed by every time they turned it over, and we didn't look like winning the game. We probably didn't deserve to win it in normal time. We were lucky to get a draw in extra time, and then the penalties, having been 2-0 up in the penalties, we spurned that, and the Down goalkeeper Stephen Keith, having saved 3 penalties, he scored the winning penalty, and it was just a disastrous situation really all round. And from our point of view, there's no point saying any different. Like, we're in the third tier championship. We have a Kilkenny legend as manager, Johnny Kelly as coach, Michael Kavanagh as coach as well, a big high profile ticket, and we didn't get anything out of 2020. We didn't get to a league. We didn't get to a 2A league final. We didn't get to a Christie Ring final. If you got to the final, the 2 teams were up. So we didn't get anything out of 2020. There was literally no saving grace from 2020 at all. So
do you look at it the flip side and say, this is Michael Fennelly's first season, he's learning on the job, interrupted season because of COVID, a team that has been on the slide for a number of years and went through management teams like hot dinners there for a couple of years, that had when other counties were able to prepare for a few weeks, there was the 3-week shutdown because of COVID in Offaly, Laois and Kildare. Do you say, we didn't even get to finish our county championship? We ended up in the first round having our game. We had to award it to Kildare because of COVID outbreak. That everything possible made it a really tall order for Offaly this year? Or do you say, we need more from Michael Fennelly in his first year, considering the ticket he has around him and Michael Duignan as chairman? Everything that you think is in place for a progressive season is there. So do you kind of, is there room for excuses here?
You're playing devil's advocate, and I appreciate that, but I just don't think there's any room for excuses, being honest with you. This is the third tier championship. We played Leinster Championship 2 years ago. I just don't think there's any room. I just don't think there's any room for excuses at that level. None whatsoever. I probably agree with you in the sense that we have gone through, backroom teams and management and different things over the last couple of years. We probably need to place trust in management. But now, Michael Fennelly's second year, if they do win Christie Ring, then his third year is in the Joe McDonagh. We're already a year behind. Do you understand what I mean? We're already a year behind where everybody thought we would be. And perhaps we lost the run of ourselves after the Derry game, a Derry game where we beat a team. We only pulled away from Derry when they had 14 men. So, I don't know. But Jesus, there's just no way, not in the month of Sundays, that we should be, not winning the Christie Ring. So, you can kind of make it at what you will, but it's a disastrous result. There's no point in saying any different.
And is it a good thing that the new season will start pretty quickly, or do you think players will walk away from it? Do you think, is the future still, obviously it's not bright because you're missing out on a year of jumping up to the next grade, but what is your mood like in general, like in terms of the prospects of Offaly?
Well, I tell you what, the mood was very high after the minors gave Laois a good trimming and the under-20s gave Westmeath a good trimming, and it's been total, the bubble has burst since giving Kildare a walkover and then losing this. I think most people will be calling for, I know it's going to take a couple of years, but most people will be calling for a lot of those 20s to be thrown in now, and for us to place some faith with new players, because what's maybe what took to the field, a lot of what took to the field last weekend has been tried and tested at that level, tried and maybe untested, I should say, because they haven't delivered. And when you don't deliver at ring level, you really probably need to look at where you're going. So I'd expect even more young players on board next year. And there could be that issue of, lads pulling away from it now because we're staring at another year in Christy Ring. We're staring at another year in 2A. Like next year, realistically, 2A qualification to a 2A final and promotion and a Christy Ring Cup. Nothing else will be accepted realistically.
Yeah, and obviously huge credit to Down for this shock win, and Stephen.
Savage, yeah, Ronan Sheehan there. I would have known him when I was working with the GPA there. A big Down hurling man, and in fairness, two Sands brothers, Owen and Dahi, like they're maxing out. They're maxing out what they have, and like that's a huge result for them. As I said in the preview show, like Offaly played Down in an All Ireland semi-final 25 years ago. Neither probably want or expect to be down here, but a huge result for Down, and Down are playing Joe McDonough hurling next year, which is massive for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As will Kildare after beating Roscommon 324-19. I mean, that was... We never
got our Fenley heritage. God only knows when that's going to happen now.
Yeah, absolutely. But geez, Kildare were very, very impressive, and I mean, I think people will expect them to win this final, but Down I think are coming in unbeaten more or less at this stage, and I think they even had a good league campaign before that. But huge victory for Kildare, going back up to that second tier, and the going is going to be hard up there next year. But Jack Sheridan a couple of goals early on, one of them from a penalty. Brian Byrne with a few scores, James Burke with 1-2. So really impressive from Kildare.
Yeah, just on that, Shane, as well, we had a couple of comments in. We mentioned in the last show that 5 of the 6 Kildare forwards are from Naas. Sheridan, Byrne and James Burke, I think, are all Naas. And one of our listeners commented in said that Naas are becoming a super club. And they are, as regards hurling in Kildare. And even hurling in Leinster over the next 10 years, I'd be expecting to hear an awful lot more from Naas. They probably took a while longer than they thought it would take to make the breakthrough in Kildare. But like when you're carrying 5 of the 6 county forwards, you're going to be fairly hard to stop at club level. And there's some lovely hurlers there. Like Brian Byrne is good enough to be playing senior football for Kildare, but he's predominantly a hurling man, so he's hurling for Kildare. And David Hervey had a tough year last year. He was down an awful lot of players last year, but they're after bouncing back up, and he'd be delighted playing Joe McDonough next year again. Yeah,
and then the Nicky Rackard semi-finals, Donegal and Mayo are through. Donegal saw off Tyrone 325-121. Jared Gilmore scored a couple of goals there. And in the other one, I think it was Shane Boland. He finished with 111. So that's Mayo. Fantastic performance by them as well, seeing off Leitrim. To be fair, we did expect Leitrim coming up from the Laurie Maher.
Yeah, no, I think my clubmate Richie Fitzsimons was refereeing that game, and I think Leitrim were well in the game and conceded a really soft goal early in the second half. And do you know when an underdog kind of concedes a score totally against their run? I think it was a 60-metre ball dropped in from Cottle Freeman, goalkeeper fumbled it, end up in the back of the net, and all of a sudden, your momentum, your bubble is just kind of burst, and Mayo totally pulled away thereafter. But I believe it was pretty tight up until that. Donegal put up a big score. Donegal put up a big score on Tyrone, considering that Declan Coulter wasn't playing and Davin Flynn wasn't playing either. So they're obviously probably going to be back for the final. I think the final is not for... I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure if it's 2 weeks or a week, but they'll have a chance of being back now. And the fact that, like, Jared Gilmore and even Jared Gilmore putting up that sort of score for them, and they're able to score 325 against, Damien Casey led the way for Tyrone again. That's going to be an interesting final. Yeah. It's like the... the Wild Atlantic Way final almost. I think Ocean FM take in Paddy McGill, who we know well, Donegal man. Ocean FM takes in Mayo and Donegal, and I think it kind of takes in Leitrim as well. So there'll be a good bit of crack coming up to that final, I'd say. And then just in the other game of the weekend, that was the last game of the weekend, was it? No Laurie Maher this week.
There was no Laurie Maher, yeah. So I think that's Fermanagh against Louth in the final, isn't it? So we'll wait and see how that goes.
Louth, yeah. So they're all been played on the same day. Just even from an Offaly point of view as well, we're missing out on, even just if we got silverware in Croke Park, it would have been huge for us. But maybe we should stop talking about, Offaly's ailing fortunes and maybe start crediting the other teams more. And fair play to Down. There was an opportunity there for them and they took it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it from the Monday Hurling Show, brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get this sweet Wexford jersey or that Cork jersey that Michael Verney, I should say, is wearing, yeah, you're not going to be Offaly manager today or tomorrow. Go to orgaretro.com, put in the promo code OurGame. You obviously won't see these jerseys out in the field again this year in the Hurling Championship. You will see your one in the Football Championship against my Tipperary in the Munster Football Final next weekend. But that's it. We've it all said. Thanks very much, Michael Verney.
Good stuff, Shane.